She hadn't spoken a single word in 18 months, until a stranger at the playground made her whisper one sound, and that whisper changed everything. The afternoon in Austin, Texas seemed veiled in a thin layer of golden sunlight. Beams of light filtered through the old oak trees, spilling across the playground at Maplewood Park, where children laughed and chased each other, their voices carried away by the warm breeze. Amid that peaceful scene, Hannah Cooper sat quietly on an old wooden bench, her eyes fixed on her little daughter on the swing, Chloe, 6 years old. Her brown hair glimmering amber in the sun, swaying gently with each passing breeze. But unlike the other children, Chloe didn't laugh. She didn't speak. Only the slow, rhythmic motion of the swing moved, like the quiet breathing of a soul trapped between the past and the present. Hannah, 36, had once been the woman American media called the shining star of Silicon Valley. She had built a tech company from nothing, leading more than 300 employees with sharp vision and rare courage. But there was one problem for which no leadership skill, no successful strategy could ever help: how to make her daughter speak again. Since that fateful day, the day Captain Mark Cooper, her husband, a U.S. Air Force pilot, never returned from a training accident, Chloe hadn't uttered a single word. No mom, no laughter, no lullabies like before. Only those deep eyes, carrying something far too heavy, too vast for a 6-year-old to bear. Hannah had tried everything: doctors, psychologists, speech therapists, and even renowned specialists in California. But every expert said the same thing: she's not physically injured. The problem is emotional. She's protecting herself through silence. Silence. 2 simple syllables. Yet to Hannah, they felt like a wall between her and her daughter. The more she tried to break through it, the smaller and more helpless she felt. Every evening after work, she still brought Chloe to this park, a place filled with laughter, with calls and chatter, with all the ordinary sounds she longed to hear again. She sat on the bench, hands clasped tightly together, watching her little girl, and in her heart whispered a single prayer. If today you could speak, even just one word, I'd know that miracles still exist. But the wind kept blowing, the swing kept moving, and the world remained silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for something about to happen. A gentle breeze drifted by, carrying with it the scent of freshly cut grass and the laughter of children at play. Hannah looked at her daughter. Chloe's small feet swung softly through the air, yet her eyes were distant, as though gazing through this world into another. The one where her father still lived. The one she had never been able to let go of. And then, through the quiet afternoon, a warm voice came from behind. "Hey there, mind if we join you?" Hannah turned around. A man in his mid-30s stood beside the empty swing next to Chloe. He wore a pale blue shirt and held a steaming paper cup of coffee. Beside him was a little girl about Chloe's age, with tousled golden hair shining in the sunlight, round eyes full of mischief. "I'm Ethan," he said, his tone simple and kind. "And this is Sophie, my daughter. She loves swings. Can I swing next to you?" Sophie tilted her head and smiled at Chloe. Chloe only nodded slightly, her eyes hesitant. She shifted a little, making space beside her. Sophie climbed up, grabbed the chain, and giggled. "I love swings," she said, "'cause when I go high, it feels like I'm flying." Hannah suddenly saw her daughter's lips move. Not to speak, just a tiny smile, fragile and fleeting, like a spring blossom opening late in the season. She hadn't seen that in months. Ethan gave Sophie a gentle push, then turned to Chloe, speaking easily, no hesitation, no pity. That's a beautiful dress you're wearing. Pink's my daughter's favorite color, too, even though she's wearing purple today. He spoke to Chloe as if her silence were the most natural thing in the world. No questions, no pressure, no sympathy. Just acceptance, quiet and genuine. And that simple naturalness made Hannah pause. For so long she had tried everything, talking to her daughter, reasoning, pleading, doing anything she could to break through that wall of silence. But this stranger, with only a few gentle words, had somehow softened her daughter's world. Sophie leaned back, laughing as the swing soared higher. "Daddy, can you teach her the secret swing trick you taught me?" Ethan laughed, eyes glinting with playful warmth. "The secret swing trick, huh? Well, I suppose I could, if she'd like to learn." Chloe turned toward him, curiosity flickering in her eyes, a spark of light Hannah thought she'd never see again. The little girl nodded, softly but unmistakably. Hannah held her breath. In that moment she knew something was about to happen. Not magic, not a coincidence, but destiny. A fated meeting between two wounded souls who had by some quiet grace found each other on a peaceful Texas afternoon. "Daddy, show her the secret swing trick," Sophie exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Ethan laughed, a warm, understanding smile lighting up his face. He walked toward the two girls kneeling beside them. Sunlight spilled across his shoulders, casting a soft golden glow that felt as gentle as his voice. "The trick," he said slowly, "is believing you're not just swinging, you're flying through clouds. And every cloud makes a sound." He began to demonstrate. His legs swung in rhythm, and he made a light whoosh sound, like the whisper of the wind. Sophie burst out laughing and immediately joined in. "Whoosh! I'm flying through a rainbow cloud." Both of them laughed, their laughter scattering through the air like shards of sunlight breaking across the late afternoon sky. Only Chloe sat still, her eyes wide, following every motion, every sound, as if she were standing before a miracle she hadn't yet dared to believe was real. On the bench, Hannah felt her heartbeat slow. In her daughter's eyes, she saw a flicker of light, the same light she thought had died with her husband's final breath beside his flag-draped coffin. Ethan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, speaking to Chloe with an unusual kind of respect, the kind one would offer to an old soul inside a child's small frame. "You know, every flyer makes a different sound. Some go whoosh, some hum, and some just whisper, like the wind." His tone carried no command, no pressure, only a gentle invitation into a safe world. A world where silence was not judged, and where a voice, if it came, would be met with love. Chloe looked at Ethan, then at Sophie, the two flying through clouds with such bright joy. She bit her lip, her fingers tightening around the swing's chain. In her eyes there was fear, curiosity, and something else, something pressing at the edges of her chest, begging to be free. Ethan smiled, as if he could read the thoughts swirling inside her. Slowly he reached into his pocket and drew out a tiny object, a small round shard of blue glass that shimmered in the sunlight, like a fragment of the ocean caught in his palm. "This," he said, "is a magic pendant. I found it on a beach in California. When you hold it and make a sound, any sound, it helps your voice fly higher than the clouds." Chloe stared at the pendant, her gaze almost entranced. Ethan gently placed it into her small palm, folding her fingers around it. "It works best," he continued softly, "when you close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the sound come out on its own. Don't force it. Just trust it. Hannah held her breath. The whole world seemed to pause. Only the wind and the faint creak of the swings remained. Chloe closed her eyes, her tiny hands clutching the pendant tightly. She took a deep breath. 1 second. 2. Then, so softly, a sound escaped her lips. Whoosh. It was as faint as a sigh, as fragile as a butterfly landing on water. But to Hannah, it was the most beautiful sound in the world. She raised her hand to her mouth, tears spilling before she could stop them. Before her eyes, the little girl who had lived in silence for 18 months had just spoken, with one slight whoosh that carried within it pain, hope, and rebirth. Ethan lifted his head, a smile radiant yet calm, like the fading warmth of sunset. "Perfect," he whispered. "You're a natural cloud flyer." Sophie laughed gleefully. "See, Daddy? She can fly too." And for the first time in so long, Hannah felt, maybe, just maybe. Miracles begin when someone believes your child can still fly. The air seemed to freeze after that very first whoosh. Ethan smiled, nodding with quiet encouragement. That's it. That's how clouds sound when they meet someone brave enough to fly through them. Chloe opened her eyes, and for the first time in nearly 2 years, there was no fear in them. Only light, only wonder. As if she herself couldn't believe that the sound had truly come from within her. Sophie shouted in delight, "She did it! She's flying too, Daddy!" Then both girls began swinging higher, laughing, shouting joyfully. "Whoosh! Whoosh!" Their voices rising like 2 tiny wings brushing against the sky. Each laugh, each sound seemed to tear apart the veil of silence that had once shrouded Chloe's world. From a distance, Hannah rose to her feet. Her heart pounded wildly, her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. That sound. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't an echo. It was her daughter's voice. She stepped closer, slowly, afraid that one wrong move might shatter the fragile magic of the moment. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting golden streaks across Chloe's hair as the wind danced around her. And then that small, clear voice rang out, louder, brighter. "Whoosh! I'm flying! Mom! Look, Mom! I'm flying!" The word Mom struck Hannah's heart like a lightning bolt. The world around her blurred until all she could hear was her daughter's trembling, real, love-filled call. "Mom!" The sound quivered, honest and raw, carrying 18 months of unspoken love and pain. Hannah collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. She rushed forward, gathering her daughter in her arms, laughing and sobbing all at once. "I hear you, baby. I hear you. You sound so beautiful." Chloe giggled, wrapping her small arms tightly around her mother's neck, her breath warm and sunlit, her lashes glistening like morning dew. "Mom, I'm flying through clouds. Can you hear the clouds too?" That question, innocent, tender, made Hannah cry even harder. She didn't answer. She just nodded, burying her face into her daughter's shoulder, feeling that tiny heart beating fast, as if the world itself had just come back to life. A few steps away, Ethan stood quietly, eyes soft, a faint smile on his face. He said nothing, just smiled. And in that smile, there was no pride, only the profound certainty that what he had witnessed wasn't magic, but a homecoming. Hannah looked up, tears still glistening, meeting Ethan's eyes through the blur. "I don't know how you did it, but you just gave me back my daughter." Ethan's voice came low and sincere. "I didn't do anything special. She was ready. She just needed someone to show her it was safe to speak again." A soft breeze swept through the park, carrying the laughter of the two girls on the swings. And in that moment, Hannah realized, sometimes safe doesn't mean never being hurt. It means knowing you are still loved, even after you've been broken. From that day on, Maplewood Park seemed to become a different place, not just a playground for children, but a place where the heart of a once broken little girl was learning to beat again. Every afternoon, Hannah brought Chloe there, and each time she heard her daughter say a few more words, laugh a little louder, live a little fuller. Ethan and Sophie were always there too. The two girls quickly became inseparable, running, singing, and sometimes simply filling the air with those familiar whoosh sounds that had once changed everything. And amid that joyful symphony of childhood, Hannah came to realize something simple yet profound. Sometimes, what we call a miracle is merely belief arriving at the right moment. One evening, as the Texas sun softened to gold, Hannah and Ethan sat together on the old wooden bench. They watched the two little girls play, their laughter mingling with the gentle rustle of the oak leaves. Hannah spoke first, her voice light, carrying a gratitude too deep for words. "I still don't understand. That day. How did you know what to do with her?" Ethan smiled, his eyes drifting away, as if reaching back to a memory only he could see. "I'm a music therapist," he said softly. "I work with children who've been through trauma, losing someone, accidents, or just too much fear. For them, music, even the slightest sound, becomes the first bridge back to the world." Hannah fell silent. She understood. That whoosh from Chloe that day, it wasn't just a game. It was the first note in the symphony of her healing soul. She turned to Ethan, smiling gently. "And the pendant, was it really magic?" Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "No, it's just a piece of sea glass I found on a beach in California when I was a kid. But when we believe there's a little magic in something, sometimes that belief itself is what truly changes us." Hannah smiled, eyes glistening. "Belief," she whispered. "Something I thought I'd lost long ago." Ethan looked at her, his gaze warm, tender, like the last light of the day. "Belief never really disappears, Hannah. It just grows quiet, waiting for a reason to speak again." In that moment, Hannah understood. Ethan hadn't only helped Chloe find her voice again. He had, without even knowing it, helped her rediscover the voice of her own heart. They both looked toward the playground where the two girls swung side by side, their whoosh sounds rising in rhythm with the wind, like breathing. And in that sound, Hannah heard the melody of life itself, music without instruments, without lyrics, only faith and love. 6 months later. The spring wind in Texas carried the scent of late-blooming lavender. Inside the small auditorium of Maplewood Elementary School, every wooden seat was filled with parents. Golden lights shone across the deep red velvet curtain. On stage, children in pure white costumes were preparing for their end-of-year music recital. Hannah sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly, her heart swelling with both nervousness and gratitude. On stage stood Chloe, the little girl who had once lived in silence for 18 months. Beside Sophie, a microphone in her hand, her eyes sparkling like drops of dew beneath sunlight. The piano began, soft, like the sound of breathing. And then Chloe's voice rose, clear, high, trembling slightly, but full of life. Fly through the clouds. Let the wind carry your sound. The entire hall fell silent. Her voice poured through the air like a ray of light, piercing every heart. Not just music, but the voice of a soul learning to trust the world again. Hannah raised a trembling hand to her mouth, tears gently falling. But this time, she didn't cry from pain. She cried with joy at seeing her daughter take flight on her own wings. Ethan sat beside her, his gaze warm, glowing like the stage lights reflected over the sea of people. When the song ended, he leaned over and whispered, "I told you, she just needed to feel safe enough to speak." Hannah smiled, her voice shaking but steady. "I used to think losing her voice was the worst thing that could have happened." Ethan looked at her, calm, deep eyes. "And now?" She turned toward the stage where Chloe and Sophie held hands and bowed. The sound of applause thundered through the room. Hannah whispered, half to him, half to herself, "Now I know. Sometimes we have to lose our voice before we can discover what we really have to say." Her words lingered in the air, slow, soaked in a strange kind of peace. As the crowd began to disperse, the four of them stepped outside. The Texas sky stretched wide, sunset spilling gold over the hair of the two girls running ahead, hand in hand. Hannah and Ethan strolled behind, the girls' laughter echoing through the soft evening air. Hannah looked at her daughter, her eyes full of gratitude. Around Chloe's neck, the small blue sea glass pendant shimmered in the wind, catching the sunlight like a fragment of the ocean. "Maybe the truest kind of magic," Hannah said softly, "is just helping someone remember how to fly again." Ethan replied with a gentle smile, the kind that told Hannah all she needed to know. The real magic had never been in the glass itself, but in the belief that someone can still find their voice in this world. Every person has their own voice. Sometimes we lose it in years of pain, but as long as someone is patient enough to wait, we'll sing our song again. Some stories don't need to end in tears. Just one laugh, one voice found again. It is enough to remind us that miracles still exist. If today's story touched your heart, leave a little whoosh in the comments to say that you still believe in magic. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Deep Life Tales, where every story is a small flight, reminding us all that anyone can learn to fly again, as long as there's someone who believes we can.